looks like we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome to our early intervention echo for our 2024. Anybody believe that we're actually saying that? I cannot. I'm going to have a hard time. We are recording today's session. It will be available just like it has in the past on our Canvas page as well as our YouTube channel. And you can access it for those. We use it for educational and quality improvement purposes. Echo, if you've never joined an Echo session, welcome. But if you have, it's an interactive community. So please put any of your comments or raise your hand. Really participate in our session. That's the way to get the most out of it. Case narratives are a great way to solidify any of the information or to get useful information from all of the amazing colleagues that are on this call for families that we are working with. Anytime we're talking about it, please remember to protect individual privacy. If you have any questions about what to share or what not to share, you can reach out to one of our great hub members. They all have an asterisk or will have an asterisk now in front of their name for you to reach out to. Thanks to them, they help us recruit our amazing presenters as well as those case presentations. So couldn't do this echo without them. Key components of an echo, we will always have a didactic speaker, a case presentation, and then it is just a way to get that professional networking, understanding who's out there doing some of those same things that we all do. If you've not done so, please take a minute to rename your profile with your name, your discipline, or where you work, just again, so we can get to know everybody. If Shelby has an amazing thing, I know that she's an SLP, and I can reach out to her about some of the questions that I have. Raising your hand, you can always do that through Zoom. You can always just put your comments in chat. Kurt and Shayna will help monitor that for us. And then we'll be dropping in a survey for you to fill out throughout the session. And that's how we get a credit for attendance. So we send out monthly certificates for that. Canvas is, again, where we're going to store all that information. I'll get an invite at the end of today's session to get that. Case studies, we are always looking for those. So if you're interested in doing a case study with a family that you're working with, or you just have some questions, please reach out to earlyecho@aggies.usu.edu and we'll get in contact with you. This is for our new iEcho. It's open. It looks like everybody was able to get on today successfully. We have also sent out a calendar invite that will hold that space. So hopefully you guys all got that. That will be coming out to just remind you on your calendar, because this new echo is a little bit different than a Zoom registration, and it doesn't have a place to hold it on your calendar. We also have some other echoes that we are holding if you're interested in joining, mental health and substance abuse, so you can register those. I'm going to stop sharing and turn the time over to our amazing presenter today, Paula, who is going to be going over that. And yep.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you very much for inviting me, Hub members, to be your speaker today. I am by no means an expert on Down syndrome. I have a lot of lived experience that you'll hear about today, but I am a former LEND trainee with UR LEND, and I was on family faculty with UR Land for many years, and am currently a research associate at NDCPD, you said here. And my current role at NDCPD, the North Dakota Center for Persons with Disabilities, is I am a navigator with North Dakota Navigators, which is one of our grant funds. And so I help individuals apply for health insurance on the marketplace or Medicaid applications. So that's my primary role right now. But before we get started, I just want to get down here. Do our land acknowledgement statement for Minot State University. We do acknowledge the Native people on whose ancestral lands we sit. We praise the Anishinaabe and the Assiniboine peoples, as well as the other sovereign nations of the Northern Plains, whose lands encompass North Dakota today, the North Dakota Band of Chippewa, the Mandan Hidatsa Rickarraw Nation, the Spirit Lake Nation, the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe, and the Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate. Our story starts 23 years ago. And today, I want to share a little bit of my lived experience over the last 23 years. But I'd like to weave in information about Down syndrome that I think would be relevant to your position with early intervention. Before I start, I want to say, and I say this everywhere, and Rebecca Foster will back me up on this, but of all the programs our family got to be a part of, early intervention has always been and will be my favorite. It was the program that helped us launch our journey. And when I thought I was buried, it really helped me bring me back to life. And I just can't thank early intervention enough and the way that it supports not only the child, but the whole family. And I hope that you see that from my presentation today. So 23 years ago, my husband and I, living in Minot, had two children, Elizabeth, who was 6, Samuel, who was 2, and I was pregnant with my third child. And I was working at, ironically, at a local nonprofit that helped people with disabilities. So for over 10 years, I did that. Little did I know that it was preparing me for my own child with a disability. So as we were pregnant, like we all do, we go through all the baby names and we thought, okay, we have Elizabeth, we have Samuel, and if we have a girl, we'll name her Grace, a biblical name, all biblical names. So Grace, and that means blessing given undeserved. We did not know anything prenatally. So, okay, that's the girl name. And then Kevin always jokes when we tell our story that if it would have been a boy, it would have been second Samuel. And thankfully, when we went to the hospital and Grace was born, she was a girl. But it was not like any other of our other deliveries. The labor was typical, the delivery was typical, but once Grace entered the world, it was not a jubilant, exciting, noise-filled environment. It was so different. It was quiet. The nurses were whispering to one another. The doctor hadn't made it there in time for the delivery. He came in, and Kevin was watching them, and they got her cleaned up and they handed her over to Kevin. And you see a picture there, and this is actually in time. My mom took this picture. And he says he kept holding her because she didn't look like our other two children. And he was hoping that the longer he would hold her before he gave her to me, maybe something was different. And there was no congratulations. There was nothing. There was still whispering and such. And finally, I'm like, Kevin, bring her over to me. Let me see Grace. And my mom was sitting right next to me, and he hands her to me. And I look over at my mom and I said, Mom, does she look like she has Down syndrome? And I don't know if you've ever had a situation where it was a pivotal moment in time, but whenever you talk to a parent who gets a diagnosis, or if you get bad news or a health diagnosis, you remember every thing about that moment in time. I remember the wallpaper, the lights, the sounds, everything stands. It's like that pivotal moment, everything before Grace and now everything after Grace. There's Kevin. And if any of you know Kevin, and I know some of you do, he's the most positive, uplifting person. He in our room looked out, and right behind his arm there is the Ward County Jail. And while Grace was taken to the NICU, he turned to that and he saw two inmates out sweeping the sand off the sidewalk. This was in April, so there was a lot of sand. We use sand to help with snowy roads and such. And so they were sweeping sand, and he noticed they had shackles on their feet. And he said, Paula, I don't remember. I bet when those boys were born, their parents, I don't know, sometimes it all comes back to you, so you'll have to forgive me. He said, when I look at them, I bet their parents were excited and everybody congratulated them on the birth of their healthy child. And he said, I don't remember ever hearing of a person with Down syndrome ever being incarcerated. And so for that moment for him, that was his acceptance of the diagnosis, and he moved forward. I, on the other hand, struggled. While I was waiting, right after her birth, my doctor came in to help get me stitched up and such. And I said something, and he said, "Yep, that looks like a mongoloid." And I mean, so some of this that I'm telling you is things not to do. One thing not to do is to use outdated terminology. A nurse came in a little bit later and patted me on the shoulder and said, there. At least you didn't have a stillbirth like the lady across the hall." And I'm like, you know what? I wanted to say to her, yeah, but that lady has closure now and she can move on. I have a new diagnosis of a child I wasn't expecting. My heart is sunk to my stomach. I don't know how to take this all in. I think it would be easier if I would have had a stillbirth. And so I'm just sharing this raw emotion. Of course, the emotions that we have, there's no right or wrong, but that's what I was feeling. I did not know how to move forward with this. And for 10 years, I had worked with people with disabilities, but now it really hit home. So I struggled. It had not only affected me, it affected our whole family. My parents now had their children, their daughter and son-in-law, and they wanted to protect us. Kevin's mother was 75 at the time, and she grew up in an age where you sent your child with a disability to an institution. And she had a doctor she worked for still at 75. She cleaned his house, and he said, "Oh, they should just send the baby to Grafton Institution." And so we had all of these emotions. And then we had our 6-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, thinking Grace was perfect and doing a little Madeline poster on the computer for her. The doctors, when she was born, our pediatrician at the time was also a good friend, and she just could not bear to tell us that she suspected Grace had Down syndrome. She had to call in a colleague, so a neonatologist named Dr. Carver became our new pediatrician, and he said, yes, looking at her almond-shaped eyes, the crease on her hand, the gap between her toes, her very low tone. She has a blood disorder where she has her red blood cells, there's more of them, so her blood is sluggish, and so we have to do a procedure. There was just so much to take in. You can even see her little low tone. And now I wish I could go back in time and just really treasure each moment and not have that grief associated with it. But you could even see her little low tone because her cheek kind of hung down a little bit. She was the best cuddler. Oh, she was so great. Um, we had doctors coming into the NICU that were residents, and they're wanting to almost, it felt like to me as I was sitting there that they were like, oh, we get to see a specimen of Down syndrome, like she was Down syndrome incarnate. And so there were so many things that happened that I really, Kevin and I then went to our medical school later to train future doctors of what to do and what not to do on how to deliver good news. So far, I'm hoping that you're taking in some of the things, what to look for in a baby with Down syndrome. Number one, always congratulate a person who has a baby. Doesn't matter if they have a disability or not. This is a baby first, and we should have been congratulated. And little did we know how much her name was going to prove to come true, a blessing given undeserved. We just didn't know it at the time. So I have here one of the most helpful guides that I believe is out there, and it's from the American Academy of Pediatrics. And I have the link on there too. There are two different guides, and they're updated all the time, but it's on special healthcare needs for people with, for children and adolescents with Down syndrome. There's a guide for parents, and there's also an accompanying guide for pediatricians. It's super helpful. So besides having all those physical characteristics that Grace had when she was born, we also had to do what's called a karyotype, which is a blood test to confirm that she had Down syndrome. Babies with Down syndrome have 50% have heart defects. Grace had an ASD, atrial ventricular, no, she had a ventricular septal defect, a VSD. A blood test because, like I said, there's a higher incidence of that. It's called polythysemia or something, the extra blood, red blood cells. There's a lot of stomach and bowel problems because there's so much low tone, and the low tone affects their whole body. So as you're working with babies with Down syndrome, it's not just their muscles, it's going to be their tongue. So it's going to affect their feeding, it's going to affect speech, and it's going to affect their bowels. A lot of them have either will have celiac, so it's tested regularly, or they may have what's called Hirschsprung's disease, or have constipation. When Grace was born, she was referred by 7 different people to the early intervention program. And the director at the time said, I've never had a baby had so many referrals to the early intervention program. And so that started right away for us. There can also be hearing and vision, thyroid, such a high incidence of hypothyroidism. Grace has that. Higher susceptibility to infections such as RSV. And then there should be also some counseling taken into effect. Really watch for, if you're starting early with a family that has a baby with Down syndrome, be sure to watch for the signs of postpartum depression for the mother. Any counseling that you might recommend for the family, or genetic counseling, because some types of Down syndrome is genetic. And you'll be such a great resource, a place to get resources to support that family. So as I said, I was still struggling. My mom would come over every day and hold baby Grace. I would feed her and I would go back to bed. I was struggling. I was on medication for postpartum depression, and my mom was really trying to help. And about 2 weeks into her, after she was born, the results of the karyotype came back. Dr. Carver called me and he said, Paula, the test came back. She has trisomy 21, garden variety. She has an extra copy on the 21st chromosome, and that's what a karyotype would look like. I hung up the phone because it was corded back then, and called Kevin, and I was just sobbing. He said, "Well, of course we know she has Down syndrome." But for me, it was almost like I had to go through that grief cycle again. And so I want to really point this out to you that different things will trigger different emotions in that grief cycle at different times. Just because a parent comes to an acceptance, if something happens, it may cause them to recycle back through it. And so always be aware. Don't think, well, that she should be past that by now. There are things that, like a typical child is going through, like they don't get invited to a birthday party. That can trigger like another cycle through the grief cycle. Those transitions are big times. So I really caution you when you are working in early intervention and that dreaded day comes to graduate from early intervention, that's a big time of grief. It's a time of loss. And you, as an early interventionist or working with people in that little ones in that time period, can really ease that transition. So back to me and my grief cycle. I just want to share, I shared how Kevin came to acceptance. I like to share my story of acceptance. So as I was saying, my mom would come over and finally she's like, "Paula, you need to get out of the house. We're going to take Grace and go to the mall and walk around." So finally I said, "Okay, fine." And we're walking around the mall. And one of the reasons I didn't want to go around, I felt like everybody was going to turn and look at my baby and judge her and look and say, "Oh, she doesn't look, she looks different," or "Look at the way she looks," or Down syndrome. And so I didn't want people to be judging my baby. So as we're walking around, we stop at a coffee shop, and my mom goes into the coffee shop, and a young lady is walking towards me, and I'm looking at her, and she's dressed all in black, a head to toe black, black hair, black lipsticks, piercings, black clothes. And my thought as she's walking towards me is, wow, her mom let her go out of the house looking like that. And this young lady walks by me, and then I hear footsteps, and she comes back around, and here she is. I call her Goth Girl, and she kind of goes down on her knee, hands on her knees, and she's looking at Grace, and I'm looking at her, and she looks down and looks up. She's looking at Grace, and she says, "She's just beautiful," and she walked away. And that was my moment of, okay, it's going to be okay. I was judging her for the way she looked, and she was my messenger that everything's going to be okay. And so from that point on, I threw myself into that early internet, and early intervention came to the rescue. And Heather, with their big yellow bag, would come once a week, and Sam would be there staring out the window to watch for her to bring all those fun toys. The top picture is when Grace was 1, and the second picture is when she was 2. And so you see right there, the biggest motivation for Grace was her big brother, Sam. And Heather knew that. And Heather incorporated Sam into everything that we did. And what I loved about Heather is she would bring the toys, but the toys really weren't for Grace. They were more for Sam. And Sam, she'd let him just play with those and incorporate that into the early intervention. And she would use things in the house that I could use the rest of the week that she didn't take away. We used laundry baskets and propped her up in pillows and strung toys across. We gave her rides, and Sam was pushing her, and we'd rock her back and forth, or lots of shaving cream in the bathtub and mirrors and putting on the high chair. I can't say enough of good things about the coach and consult model and the way that Heather used it with our family, and using, you can see books. Books were big, and lots of music. And so when you're working with a baby with Down syndrome, I think people underestimate how bright they really are. Grace learned so many signs. We use sign language to communicate. We used a lot of signing time videos and lots of music. And Heather also knew that it was really important to give space and time to Grace to process things. What I see sometimes when people working with little ones with Down syndrome is they don't give them enough time to process. If you say something, give them time to think it through and then respond. Don't just jump in right away and correct or do something for them. Give them that time and space. It's so important. Here's a chart from the North Dakota, the National Down Syndrome Society, and it's milestones for the typical range of typically developing children and the range for Down syndrome. And if you look at it, I can't see my little screen, so that's why I'm looking over here, like walks alone. For the range for Down syndrome is 1 to 4. For typical, 1 to 2. Grace didn't start walking until she was 3.5. In fact, she wasn't even crawling. She did this really funky thing where she twirled on her hands and feet, and she looked like she was doing mini cartwheels. And our Heather would say, okay, we're going to work on crawling. I'm like, oh, what's the big deal if she's getting around and she took the time to explain why it's important to do things developmentally and patterning and different interventions that she was doing to help Grace develop to her best potential. But what I want you to really see here is babies with Down syndrome, toddlers with Down syndrome do reach the milestones. They just do it on their own timeline. And that's where you come in. And by teaching the parents what to do during the week after you leave to help them reach their milestones and develop in the appropriate timeline. On top of all of your well checks and early intervention and case management and all the paperwork that you have to do, you have still all of these follow-up appointments because you need to be on top of any special healthcare situations that may come up. So here is from that same guidebook that I referred to before, but from age 1 month to 5 years. So these are some things as you're working with little ones in early intervention programs that you as a professional can help watch out for because you see them more often than the pediatrician does. Make sure that parents know that there is a Down syndrome growth chart and that pediatricians should refer to that and not the typical growth charts. There are specific ones just for Down syndrome. So then it doesn't look like they're underweight or not growing in height. Neurology, be sure that you're kind of watching out for seizures. There's a higher incidence of that. Another area that's very common with Down syndrome is neck instability in the first and second vertebrae. It's called atlantoaxial instability. If you see a different change in posture or tilt of the head, or they are standing and they're not, if you see differences in their gait, anything like that, you may want to have the parent take them to check out for that AAI, as it's called, because if it's not followed and corrected, it can cause permanent damage and even death. And that's why people like my Grace who have it cannot go on trampolines or things where they may injure their neck. Some people have to have those first 2 vertebrae fused together. Also, you're a great resource for support services, for referral. higher incidence of sleep apnea. They are now wanting around the age of 3 or 4 um, toddlers with Down syndrome to have a sleep study. And you can read about this in this guide. There's so many different skin problems from eczema. Grace has, and so many, especially young adults with Down syndrome, get boils on their bottoms and in between their thighs. Um, and what I found to work really well for that is tea tree oil. I just put it on neat right on that and it dries it up. But some people need some pretty extensive medications to take care of those very painful boils. I don't know why it's so prevalent with Down syndrome, but on all my Facebook groups, it's a big problem that people with Down syndrome have. Dental, their teeth come in. Grace's teeth came in so random. They don't follow the same. They may follow the same, but not. And there's a higher incidence of leukemia. I remember once Grace had those pin prick, the petechiae, whatever it's called, on her arms, and I had a medical home at that time, so Dr. Carver was my medical home, and I was able to have access to him at any time. And I called him and I said, she has these little dots all over. He said, bring her in today. We need to run a test. Thankfully, it was not leukemia. It could have been just an injury from bumping or something. And then that counseling a piece again. Each person with Down syndrome is an individual. They don't have all of these things, but it's good to be aware of some possible things to look for. So right now, before I go on with a little bit more of my story, I just want to reflect and takeaways. And in light of the time, I think I was going to open it up, but I think I'm just going to highlight them and hopefully that you were able to pick this up between my story. Always say congratulations. Anytime you have something even remotely negative to share with a family, say a positive first. Each family is unique and each family member will react differently. Kevin, I remember Grace was home about a week. I'm holding him and he drove up in a motorcycle. I'm like, what in the world? So family members react differently to stress in their lives. Grief comes in cycles and be aware of that. Help people work through it. Watch for postpartum. Babies and toddlers with Down syndrome reach the milestones. They just may take a different route. People with Down syndrome aren't always happy. That's a stereotype. They have the whole range of emotions just like anyone else. And they really do resemble their family more than all Down syndrome looking alike. Be sure to learn how to deliver difficult news with grace and compassion. Don't sugarcoat it. I had a friend that came to the hospital, good friend still today, and she said, Paula, this is going to be hard, but it's going to be good. It's just going to be different. I appreciated that. Help making connections. You know, the best place families can get information is with other families. So if you could make those connections with other families who are going through the same situation, it'll be so helpful. Family voices, parent mentors, information through URLand. Continue to learn and update yourself on Down syndrome. And the guidelines are always changing and being updated. So stay on top of that and just have fun as you're working, because there are no more fun people than people with Down syndrome, which I hope that you don't mind that I want to share the rest of my story with you. So this was a time of growth for our family. Grace shaped us all in many ways that I can't even put into words. She did so much more than I ever hoped or imagined. She became the center of our family. Our whole family revolved around her. My mom would whisper, "Don't tell the other grandchildren, but Grace has a special place in my heart." She was included in all sorts of community activities, and we were very active in our Down syndrome support group. So there's our little family of 5. We were really happy. And Kevin and I would say, maybe someday we should adopt. Maybe Grace should have a sibling, a sister who she could identify with. And we'd revisit that every now and then. Finally, one day, Elizabeth, our oldest, said, Mom and Dad, you should just stop talking about it. If you're going to adopt, you better do it soon while I'm still at home and I can help. I want to know my new little sister if you're going to adopt. She was 14 at the time. Snarky. So we started looking. We looked in the United States first, and there were several couples willing to adopt and waiting to adopt a child with Down syndrome. We did research and found that in Eastern European countries, especially, babies with Down syndrome are left at the hospital and then transferred to orphanages. And so we were able to find an organization that had little girls around 4 or 5. And at that age, they would be transferred from their baby house or orphanage to a mental institution where most die within the first year. So we felt like, okay, let's adopt a child, a little girl who's about 4 or 5. And so this agency sent us a listing with pictures just like this. This is just that was her fake name, Brandy. And we had like 15 of them, and we were going through and we thought, well, let's bring Grace in. And Grace came in and she's looking and she's like, "Oh, that's me. That's Grace," when we landed on this one. So we're like, okay, that's who we'll commit to. So we committed to little Brandy and started the international adoption process, found out she was in Ukraine, and in 2011, adopted Bella. She was 4.5, weighed 27 pounds. One of the reasons I want to share the rest of our story is to show the impact or the lack of what the lack of services do for children with Down syndrome. Bella only spoke Ukrainian and Russian. And while we were there for 2 months adopting her, we used sign language to bridge that gap. And so if we wanted to teach her apple, we'd say it in Ukrainian and sign apple. Pretty soon, if she could pick that up, we would say it in English. By the time Bella was done using sign language, she had 194 signs. But she had lots of sensory issues. She wasn't held. She still to this day makes gulping frog noise sounds, and it's her self-soothing that she does. She has a lot of sensory issues because of being in an orphanage. I wanted to show this picture of all those little people there walking along. They're all 4 or close to 5, and look how tiny they are because of lack of nutrition. When we first met Bella that day, they handed us a jar of baby food to feed her. And we're like, she's almost 5, but in order to feed a whole group of children around a table, they would puree all the food. So she had so many textures. She still has issues with texture. And there she is. She didn't have any clothes of her own. It was all orphanage clothing. So when we brought her home, she went from unmatched, ugly clothing to tons of clothes from her cousins. And that very first day, this is the day after we brought her home, she has a whole bunch of clothes on and she'd go one at a time. Her name is Bogdana. We changed it to Bella, but she'd say Bogdana and Bogdana, and this is for Bogdana. And she's still an fashion diva to this day. And they became sisters like we thought they would. And just inseparable. They still are so close. But I was helping other people adopt, kind of go through the international adoption process as a volunteer. And I would see all these little people that needed families. And I fell in love with this little young man, and his name was Nathan. And his real name is Novak, but the nickname of Novak in Serbia is Nole. And so we committed to Nole and brought him home in 2011. Now, Nole, that's us in Serbia, and they did not get along at right, Bella and Nole, but now they're super close. He lived with a foster family. This is his foster family. And you could just see the different development because he was with the family and he was cared for. Even though he didn't have early intervention, he did not have any sensory type issues. He bonded well. That is his birth mother. We still are in contact with her today. And there's little Nole. So Kevin says, well, now Nole needs a little brother. And I'm like, no way. I am done. My plate is full. I can't do it anymore. But he wore me down. And in 2015, we adopted Simus. And that's his real given name. And I want to show this video because it is so powerful. I want to just give you a little backstory before I play it. It's just super, super short. This is the exact moment we met Simus. He was at an orphanage. He was almost 6. And it was all women except for the groundskeeper. And he knew that his papa was going to be coming that day to meet him. And he had seen other people other friends be adopted. He had been waiting. Kevin says, I think he was saying, what took you so long to get here? And you'll notice a little girl in the back who uses a wheelchair, Melania, and she's yelling, Simi, Simi. And then our facilitator, and you'll hear her say, we've been waiting for Simus's father. And I'll just play it.
Hello, Simus. Hello.
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 Okay, everybody was waiting for Sima's father.
Hi, buddy. Simus. Daddy. Daddy.
Labas.
Daddy.
Kodu vardu Ina. Ina.
So we met, and we call him Simus because it's just pronunciation wise, that's all it is. He was in a very poor orphanage. He was, you'll see, look how flat his head is. He had a very serious heart defect. And so for the first 6 to 7 months of his life, he laid on his back waiting for surgery. He has Hirschsprung's disease. They thought he was stubborn and he wouldn't listen. Well, when we got him home and we found out he is deaf in his left ear, hard of hearing in his right, he missed out on all of that early speech. So he has virtually no spoken language to this day, but everyone loves Simus. He is everyone's best friend wherever he goes. He's an amazing young man for all the obstacles that he's had to overcome. And I love this quote, weeds are flowers too once you get to know them. He loves blowing dandelions. So our family has blossomed because of Down syndrome. And we couldn't be more thankful to have all 4. Kevin and I will never have an empty nest, but we'll never be bored. And we always have love. And I'm hoping that through my story that I just shared, that you will be able to see that each person with a Down syndrome is unique. Each of them have different needs, but there are special healthcare concerns that you as a professional can help the families watch for and take care of so that they can develop to their fullest potential. It's Grace. She has tons of confidence. Bella is full of joy. She's an expert texter. Nole is love, lovey-dovey. And Simus is thankful for everything and every day. So my parting words to you are, people with Down syndrome are always on the receiving end of services, it seems like. I hope that you will open your heart and see what they have to give you and that they can teach you. And that's all.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. That was an amazing story. And I also really loved that you talked about those extra developmental milestones that with Down syndrome. So that's really helpful to have. Are you okay if I open it up to a few questions if anybody has
Definitely.
questions?
Paula, I have a question. This is Angela Shaw.
Hi,
Can you hear me?
Angela.
Hi.
I can.
Okay. You mentioned that you and Kevin will never be empty nesters. Just curious, I'm sure you have some like long-term plans for the kids. If you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you. Our hope is that we will be empty nesters, but if you talk to families who are at our stage in life, most of them are planning just to get through the day, and that futures planning is something that's so overlooked and so pushed to the side. Kevin is a special needs trust planner, and when he meets with other families, their plan is that that they will outlive their child by one day. And that's not a good plan. And so our plan is to transition slowly. We have a house that we're going to turn in our basement into an apartment for us to live in. And then we'll slowly move out and let them and use more of the technology of remote assistive. And who knows what's going to happen in the next 10 years. But if I have to live with them for, I want to get them as independent as possible so that they can continue on with life without us.
Does someone have a question?
There's one in the chat.
Okay. It says, I've heard that siblings of special needs children seem to split down the middle. Half use the skills and experience they've gained to work in, it moved. Work in the giving fields. The other half want nothing to do with it. How have your older children reacted to their experience?
We've been very careful, tried to be very careful of not burdening, if that could be the word, the older two. And we've used respite care for if we wanted to go on a date or something, and really let them be just the brother and sister. And we've also done lots of planning so they won't have to, unless they want to, take their siblings and care for them after we're gone. But both of them have entered giving fields. Elizabeth's a Head Start teacher in Kansas, and Sam works for the Red Cross in St. Paul.
And Ben.
And Elizabeth, she was so cute when she was dating. She's like, I'm using my siblings as a screening mechanism. If they don't pass the Down syndrome test, then they're not good enough for me. So thankfully, her husband passed the test.
Nice. There's one other question. This will be our last question is, have you gone through the process of once they turn 18, that you have to still claim them as a dependent? So it sounds like guardianship.
Yeah. So for Grace, we're going to look at each child independently. Grace had high anxiety and lots of other issues, and we just knew that she wouldn't be able to make decisions, medical and financial, on her own. So we did guardianship for those areas, and then Bella, even though we did go through guardianship for her on those same two areas, I'm thinking that the next time we do in North Dakota, we have to review every 5 years. We might be able to do something a little bit differently with Bella. And I don't know about the boys yet.
Great. Well, Paula, again, thank you for sharing with us. I'm going to turn the time over to Kristen, who is going to present our case.
Okay, I just kind of threw this together a little bit ago, so hopefully I give you the information that you need. And if you have any questions for me while I'm going, you can ask me. Kurt, you can cut me off and ask me questions if you need me to be more specific. So, okay, you can go to the next slide. Okay, so I have a 9-year-old boy with Down syndrome. His name is Max, and we did go through the up to 3 program. And that's how I actually know Dr. Phillips, is that he was our physical therapist. And then we also have some family ties to him. So he's been a huge help and advocate for our family. The main settings that we have concerns with, like the disability, would will definitely be at home and at school. Actually, probably I would add church to that too, because he hates church. So some background pieces about that is he's 9 years old. He was a really cute, fun baby. He just super easy. We traveled to the Philippines with him, so he went on a 19-hour flight and spent 2 weeks in the Philippines. He traveled well. We travel a lot, and he went everywhere with us and traveled great. He slept great. He was just really, really easy. And then he got older, and some of like the behavior problems started happening. And he's also the youngest of 4 kids. And he is really spoiled and loved a lot by his community. And so he kind of is a little bit of I don't know if diva would be the right word, but he gets a lot of attention. And so he's just really used to everybody catering to him. And so he's definitely got some behavior issues that probably like stem from that a little bit too. There was a guy, I think his name was like Dr. Phillips, who warned us a little bit about that, but we didn't really listen, and it did kind of get worse. So the first signs we started seeing, he started waking up a lot in the night. And then in order to get him back to sleep, he would require like weird routines. Like the sheet or the comforter would have to meet all 4 corners of the bed perfectly, or he would have to have his pillow perfectly square. And if he wouldn't have it just the way he wanted, he would just freak out. And when it's in the middle of the night, it was just really kind of hard. So he wasn't sleeping good. And then during the day, he has a sister he doesn't get along with very well, and he was calling her really rude names. He was doing really impulsive things, like he brought a hose in from the outside of the house, and he hosed down his brother's Xbox, and like drenched our couch, our carpets, and everything. He would run away, things like that. And he obviously did a million adorable things, but I think I'm supposed to be asking for help here. So and focusing on those things. And so he had a lot of really crazy impulsive behaviors that were really hard to deal with. It did end up that when he, probably about 6 months ago, I work for a psychiatrist, and I started like becoming more familiar with ADHD. And I was like, man, that sounds a lot like Max. And I didn't realize that he could have ADHD. I thought that his symptoms were just a result of his Down syndrome. But I asked her about it, the combination with the Down syndrome, and she was like, no, it's actually super common. And I think she told me 60% of a likelihood or something like that. And so I had him seen by her, and she did diagnose him with ADHD, and it has gotten significantly better. But he does still require a lot of hands-on parenting. So there's a little background. So his family life is his dad and I are married. He has 3 siblings. Max is the youngest. He has a really close relationship with his extended family, particularly his grandma. He's really close with his grandma, and he is close with his grandpa too, but they're kind of nemesis a little bit. He's really close with his aunts and uncles and cousins. He gets a lot of social interaction with extended family, and we're Caucasian. We come from a religious culture. For our other children, we are pretty relaxed parents. We do mostly authoritative parenting style. I'm not a big fan of reward and punishment type, like behavioristic parenting. However, there's no other choice with Max. It seems to be the only type of parenting that he can process. And so we do a lot of that. We have, like, just to give you an example, I'm getting ready to start a master's program, and so I'm doing an internship with a psychiatrist, and I worked those 2 days a week, and he was just not going to school for his brother on the days that he was getting him to school. And so we have a chart up, and if he went to school good that day, he'll draw a smile face on the chart. And then when I get home, if I see the smile on the chart, meaning he went to school good, then he gets a root beer when he gets home. So those are some of the types of things that we do for parenting with him. You can do the next slide. The primary area of concern with him or the program. So our primary, I kind of like put a couple, like what our concerns were from 0 to 3. I was just super hyper focused on whether he would walk or talk. I really couldn't think of anything else, actually. And it was my primary reason it was really, really hard to nurse because of his low muscle tone, but I would not give up because I had read somewhere that it would help him to have an easier time talking. Now I probably wish I wouldn't have nursed so that he would have talked a little less. But it was all I thought about. I wanted him to walk. I wanted him to talk. And I think that that's why physical therapy for the up to 3 program felt like the most useful one to me, because I felt like it was something that we could see, like almost like it felt more tangible. Like the results seemed more immediate in a sense. The talking obviously didn't, because he was still a baby. So speech therapy was a little more difficult, but we did, those were my biggest concerns. But then from then on, it's definitely just been behavior. The behavior has been tricky. And even when we're doing our very best at parenting and doing, we can get his behavior in shape, like we can. It's not that he's like, we can't get him to conform, but it's like super exhausting because you can't ever rest. Like if you're not on your A game, like if you're not constantly doing everything you can to keep him in line, then he's not. And so it's like sometimes it can be a really big stressor in the home. And not that there's not obviously wonderful moments in between. Like we have so much fun with him and he is great. And we have lots of friends and family who take him and we get breaks and stuff like that. And we love being with him. But his sister in particular really struggles because, like I said, they don't get along and he's constantly calling her rude names. He's having a lot of problems this year at school because he changed the way they do it in our school system. Is he when he went into third grade, he changed teachers. They have a different style than the last year's teachers, and he will not comply for them. And so he's spending most of his time, from what I understand, sitting down on the ground and not doing what he's supposed to do. And then also the impulsive behavior has gotten significantly better. But then there is still some impulsive behavior that we get concerned about. Next slide. Okay, so the goals and barrier, I would say that my goal for him would be to have him to be able to function better at school by being compliant and less disruptive. I'd also hope that he would be more obedient so that there would be less stress in our home. The barriers have been that the school only does life skills. They are trying to do more inclusion, but the problem with the way they do inclusion is that it feels impossible because I feel like if he were to be included in the classroom, he's not capable of doing what they do in the classroom. And so he just would be sitting there and being disruptive. And so like they would send him with an aide, but even with an aide, it wouldn't be like tailored to what he is capable of. And so I just feel like it's the best option is for him to be in life skills, but then he's also surrounded by people who have behavior problems, some more severe than his. And so it's all he sees is behavior problems, but then he can't function in a typical classroom. And so I feel like that's a huge barrier with how they set it up. And then on top of that, they bus all of the special needs kids into one school. And so there's the teachers and aides, but then instead of having a couple of kids that are demographically meant to go to that school, they'll have 10 special needs kids all in the same class. And I just feel like it's really overwhelming for the teachers and aides. And that's been frustrating for me. And then I would say that other barriers have been that doctors rarely really gave me any information about Down syndrome. Most of the time we were just told that the spectrum was just really wide, so it's hard to know what to expect or what things would look like. I think that I wish that I had been able to prepare a lot more for the behavior issues. I think that the only person who kind of warned me was probably Kurt. I think that I wish that I had known that there was I really wish that I had known about ADHD because I think we would have gotten him treated a lot sooner, especially seeing how significant the difference has been. I also think they also have diagnosed him with OCD, and we're not treating it right now, but I didn't have any idea that was common with Down syndrome either, and also can be treated, and their anxiety can be treated the same way for you can a typical kid. But I feel like most people who have kids with Down syndrome would think that that's just part of their Down syndrome. At least I did. And then does the individual program. Let's see, if I'm being honest, other than the physical therapy, I really didn't feel like we did get a lot of help from the Up to 3 program. Other than like support for me, I felt like it was a lot of support for me, but as far as helping Max, he was just like a baby. I feel like physical therapy really helped him to advance himself. But it was hard with the speech therapy. And then I think he also got occupational therapy, if I remember, but they would come for like 15 or 20 minutes. And I don't really know that I remember it making a huge difference, but I do remember that physical therapy did. So then also, so the triggers and stressors related to the issues, as I think I think as a parent that's new to disability, the trigger is that you're so scared about the future. Like the thought of not knowing what your kid's future is going to look like. And I personally didn't have any experience with disability at all. I didn't know anybody with a disability. I'd never worked with people with disabilities. I didn't know anything about it. And so I just was so scared about what his future was going to be like. And I think you want your kid to be functional, but you feel like there's so much pressure to do like extra things, which is difficult when you have other children and you already have so many responsibilities. It just feels like a lot of stress on the family to feel like you have to do all of this extra stuff just so that your kid can function. And I think that that's probably one of the other reasons why I say physical therapy felt so beneficial, is because it's not just because it probably is because it was Kurt, because he would always remind me that I didn't need to do those things. He would remind me that I think that the lady in her presentation said they will meet all their milestones. They will just meet them on a different time frame. And that really helped me to like calm down and not stress, and to remember that it would come. It was just going to be different timetable. Anything? Okay, so 2 or 3 things that I would want suggestions on would be mental health issues with Down syndrome and how to recognize them. Help with behavior, like what are some like tried and true ways that you can help kids with behavior that are like not just in the moment, but that are like shaping and like long lasting, if that makes sense. Not just solving the problem that's right in front of you, but like actually shaping not like their personality, but like their behavior in general, so that they're just generally more compliant. And then suggestions for inclusion that works when the school system is set up in the way that it is in our valley.